So the entire world has their eyes glued to the Middle East right now. As of January 11th, 2026, Iran's streets are on fire with protests that started over a tanking economy but have exploded into a full-on call to ditch the Iranian regime. President Trump posted on Truth Social, "Iran is looking at freedom perhaps like never before. The USA stands ready to help. President Donald J. Trump." And then check out this video. This is insane, seeing what's going on the streets of Iran right now. Molotov cocktails, streets are on fire, and these brave Iranian protesters look like they're not backing down at this point, but they're being slain in the hundreds, with reports coming in saying anywhere from 116 to 400 protesters being killed. It looks like there's a consensus with somewhere around 200 at the time of this video being made. And then there's this diagram that I found on X with some reports showing that there has been an increased load of aircraft flying towards the Middle East, potentially cargo aircraft, C-17s, but it could be something more, aerial refuelers, and who knows what else is headed that way. And this crackdown from the Iranian regime on their own citizens, slaying hundreds of them, that is straight out of a dictator's playbook. And the big twist here is that the US military is briefing President Trump on surgical strikes to help out the protesters. They could hit IRGC, that's your first acronym, the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps headquarters, spots and economic lifelines that are keeping the regime in power without putting a massive amount of boots on the ground. And then you've got Israel right there in the mix, ready to team up with the USA. So stick around to the end of this video because you'll see how these strikes could flip the script on Iran's next new nuclear game, their Hezbollah proxies, pretty much all the mayhem they're causing around the world, and not to mention killing hundreds of their own protesters. And this is turning into whispers of regime change real quick. So think of Assad's quick exit in Syria back in 2024, but with way more missiles in play. And speaking of Syria, just as of today, the US is striking ISIS in Syria on a massive level. So redirecting some of those air assets towards Iran would not be hard at all. All the assets are already in theater. It just takes the flip of a switch to redirect them from Syria over to Iran, from striking ISIS one day to striking the regime in Iran the next day. So today we'll break down the threats. We'll do that hypothetical situation at the end of what could happen if President Trump greenlights these strikes. So let's dive in. But just like that, this whole situation has that familiar tingle with Iran. It's like when your ex texts you at 2 a.m. saying, "Hey, I've changed."
Great, thank you for being so...
All right, so let's paint the picture of who's holding the whip here in Tehran. At the top is Supreme Leader Ali Khamenei, who's been calling the shots since 1989 after rising through the ranks as a mid-level cleric. I mean, you could just see like the dictator cleric school. He starts out basically at Slytherin and then works his way up. Even though on paper Iran has a president, the president basically just follows the radical ideas of that religious extremist that's at the top. Because the religious extremist, Khamenei, is the guy who greenlights everything from proxy wars to the protest beatdowns that we're seeing right now. And then you've got the IRGC, the Iran Revolutionary Guard Corps. This parallel military force is basically the regime's enforcer wing, but they've got a lot of troops, 190,000 troops, and a budget that rivals some smaller countries' GDPs, all funneled into suppressing dissent and funding outfits like Hezbollah with their proxy wars. These protests, they originally kicked off on December 28th, 2025 over the rial, Iran's currency's free fall. It lost 90% of its value in a year thanks to sanctions and just total mismanagement, rerouting all the different funds to the regime's inner circles instead of to the people themselves. And this is breaking news coming in from Iran itself. Because of the emergency situation there, a leaked confidential directive from the central bank in early January 2026 instructed major banks, payment networks, and financial institutions to activate emergency modes. This includes preparing for power outages, cyber disruptions, shutdowns, and operating without centralized control in anticipation of nationwide unrest or sabotage. The memo highlights the regime's fragility in maintaining financial control during potential collapse scenarios. They've also directed all of the gold from the entire country to go to one central location. And these are moves that we've seen before. Even in Venezuela, prior to the strike there, a lot of the inner circle started redirecting their cash to Miami. So when the heat gets put on dictators and their inner circle, they start doing things exactly like what we're seeing right now. But now this has morphed into chants against the entire regime. The entire regime has been called to be taken down by the people themselves. Obviously, that's why we're seeing the protests. Protesters are straight up begging the US for help at this point, and we can see the clips of them really trying to do everything they can to take down the regime and finally live a life where their hard work actually amounts to something. They're waving American flags. They're yelling for strikes on police headquarters. Trump's team has been briefed, that was on January 10th, on options that would hit military targets and also IRGC, which is kind of a blend between a police force and a military. Again, like we talked about, it's the Dr. Evil wing of the military that rolls in and tries to protect the regime and just tries to keep them in power. That's their number one job. If you guys want, go ahead and join the Max Ready Room. That's where I do lives once a week where we break down situations just like this, but we go way more in depth. I think you'll enjoy it. I built an entire Ready Room that represents a fighter Ready Room prior to stepping out to the flight line. So check that out in the comments below. Just click that link in the description. But the goal of the US would likely be to kneecap the Iranian regime's crackdown without sparking World War III. Israel's foreign minister Gideon Saar called it a quest for freedom. And over the weekend, Benjamin Netanyahu has been on the horn with Rubio about joint moves, tying this to Iran's nuclear rebuild after that June 2025 air war, where Iran lost big on their nuclear facilities. But even more than their nuclear facilities are their ballistic missiles, which we saw strike into Tel Aviv. And reports are coming in saying that the protests alone won't topple Khamenei. They would need an external boost to spark the actual defections inside the regime itself, much like how Assad in Syria had to bolt to Moscow when his proxies basically crumbled around him. So what are the stakes here? If this escalates, it's said that Iran's got 1,000 to 2,000 ballistic missiles left and they're rebuilding every day. They're going to be aimed at US bases in the Gulf and at Tel Aviv, but Iran's air defenses are extremely weakened. And as we saw in Venezuela, if you're sitting with Chinese or Russian air defenses in your Golden Palace, I probably wouldn't be sleeping very well right now with US tech going up against you. So this is kind of like herding cats in a thunderstorm. Everybody's freaking out. No one knows what's going on. The regime is basically losing control, and it looks like someone's got to step in before all this goes sideways, and then a power vacuum comes into Iran where now ISIS or some other extremist group gets a hold after this regime, and now things are worse than they were before. So now let's shift gears to the actual jets that could pull this off basically without anybody seeing them coming at all. Leading the pack from the US is the jet that executed in that 12-day war last year. That's the B-2 stealth bomber. This is the flying wing that's been the US Air Force's deep strike king since the 1990s. It's got a blended body wing design with radar absorbent materials that make it look like a hole in the sky basically to enemy radars. It spans 172 feet from wingtip to wingtip. It weighs in at 336,000 pounds. Fully loaded. It's powered by 4 GE F118 GE100 turbofans, each pushing 17,300 pounds of thrust. It cruises at 560 miles per hour, but again, speed isn't really the factor here. This thing's all about stealth. It goes up to above 50,000 feet, but the real magic is unrefueled range of about 6,900 miles, letting it launch from places like Diego Garcia in the Indian Ocean and hitting Tehran without midair pit stops, which is just insane. But for the Israeli side, don't sleep on them either. It's the F-35 Lightning II. That's a 5th-gen stealth fighter that you've heard me talk about many a times. At this point, I'm basically an F-35 fanboy. You can't blame me, though. This thing is all about network-centric operations, so it can talk to everything in the battle space. This is Lockheed Martin's single-engine beast with a 43-foot wingspan and composites that scatter radar like confetti at this point. It clocks in at Mach 1.6, that's 1,200 miles per hour, and it hits those dashes on its Pratt & Whitney F135 engine, which cranks out 43,000 pounds of thrust with afterburner capable. But these aren't solo acts. The B-2's bomb bay hauls 40,000 pounds of ordnance for precision drops, while the F-35 sensor fusion lets it spot threats from over 100 nautical miles away and share that data with everyone around them. It can share the data with the Iron Dome back home in Israel as well. In a combo op, you'd see B-2s ghosting in for the bunker runs, hitting anything that had any depth, but also hitting surface structures as well from the IRGC. And then F-35s would be circling at somewhere around 25,000 feet to suppress surface-to-air missile sites that might get a lucky golden BB shot off on the Mosquito that's on their radar scope. So they would be taking those down, and the performance has evolved since the 12-day war as well, because during that 12-day war, when those F-35s roll in and struck the S-300 sites, they're hoovering up electronic information as well, or ELINT for you acronym lovers out there. But let's talk about the payloads that would turn these airframes into regime wreckers for Iran. For the B-2, it's all about the ability to carry a massive amount of weapons. Now, they could carry the GBU-57 if they needed to, but that is more of a penetrator bomb for the deep underground facilities for the nuclear weapons. In this case, the B-2 will be loaded down likely with GBU-31s for surface structures on the IRGC. Those pack a punch. Carrying multiple of those, being able to do air bursts with those as well, would take out bunkers or any other hardened structures where the IRGC is deployed to try to take down these protesters. And then when it comes to the F-35, think GBU-39. Those are small diameter bombs. They've got a 285-pound warhead, and they can glide in over 50 nautical miles, which is amazing. So they could glide in and they could hit IRGC locations all around the country. They've also got autonomy, AI-driven target recognition that could save friendlies and target the enemy real time. And then Israel's also got the Spice 2000 glide bomb that has a pop-out wing structure for over 60 nautical mile runs. And they use AI as well to self-correct mid-flight. They could be dodging Iran's defenses. And then you throw in cyber elements like Mossad's hacks for facial recognition on actual IRGC commandos, and you've got a package that could blind the regime while the bombs basically do the talking like typically needs to be done with the Iranian regime. But then autonomous drones like the RQ-4 Global Hawk would be up above even before this operation went down. They could be up at 50,000 feet doing 30-hour shifts, feeding live information to all the different air assets and all the different decision makers to decide when it's time to go in. They could actually be doing a real count of how many protesters is Iran killing real time, and you could be supplying that information to the different air power assets. But if this goes hot for a regime change and Delta teams need to go in, they could be getting that information piped directly to them as well. So hitting those targets in Iran would be like threading the needle, because again, you have to be very precise when you're targeting the IRGC that's blended in with the local population. So let's talk about a hypothetical situation about how this could go hot at any minute now, really, at this point. Let's say Tehran gets even more gridlocked and reports of 50 more dead in one night come in from militia sweeps that are actually going on right now. Let's say President Trump gives the green light for a limited surge. It would be a surge that would echo Operation Midnight Hammer, but it would be dialed in to protect the crowds and go up against the IRGC. So B-2s would lift off from Diego Garcia, 4 of them slicing across the Arabian Sea. They'd be topped off by KC-135s, and then they would slip past the Iranian radars as they're up above 30,000 feet. They're basically the ghost machine in the middle of the night, thanks to that stealth coating that would be able to crack the regime wide open. They'd cross over the mountains in Iran, and they would ripple off GBU-31s screaming down into IRGC bunkers near Qom. The ground would shake like an earthquake as those IRGC bunkers went away. They'd be taking out those command nodes as well that are connected to those bunkers that allow the IRGC to talk to each other throughout the entire country. Meanwhile, 8 F-35Is would take off from Israel, and they'd be streaking in at over Mach 1.2. Their APG-81 radars would be painting any type of surface-to-air missile defenses that Iran has turned on. The lead pair of F-35s would pop out GBU-39s from over 50 nautical miles away. Those things would glide in, locking on to IRGC convoys sitting outside of the barracks and smash their different trucks so they didn't have the ability to go kill the protesters that day. Boom, IRGC headquarters gone, IRGC transportation gone, and a massive message sent to Tehran. But the regime's not one to back down, so they might just ramp up and fire ballistic missiles directly at Israel and directly at US bases, and at this point, they might really feel the squeeze that regime change is is just around the corner, so they might pull out all the stops, which then would mean that the US and Israel would have to ramp up, and it would basically be a big you-know-what measuring contest until the regime fell. And that wouldn't take very long, in my opinion, but it would probably take longer than what we saw in Venezuela. What do you guys think? Do you think that we'll see the fall of the regime in Iran? It could literally happen any day now, or this could boil on for months. Let me know what you think in the comments below. Would love to hear your thoughts. And then follow me on X, follow me on Instagram, and then watch one of these videos that pop up right here. It's basically the best compliment you can give me. I'll see you in one of these videos that pop up right here. This is Ryan, also known as Max Afterburner, signing off.